He grew up believing the worst thing that ever happened to him was being abandoned at an orphanage. He was wrong. 15 years after being adopted by a billionaire family, he had everything: power, money, a future carefully designed by others. Then one rainy afternoon, a delivery girl crashed into his car. She was stubborn, proud, and strangely familiar. Neither of them recognized the past they once shared. What he didn't know was that she was carrying his child. What she didn't know was that loving him again could cost her life. And the lie she told to protect him would take 10 years to unravel. They learned the sound of abandonment early, long before they understood the word. It lived in the echoing hallways of the orphanage on the outskirts of the city, in the way footsteps faded without returning, in the careful tone adults used when they promised things they could not keep. Among dozens of children, 2 of them grew up side by side, not because fate announced it, but because survival quietly demanded it. The boy's name was Nathan Grock. He was white, thin, sharp-eyed, and unusually silent for his age. He listened more than he spoke, watched more than he reacted. Numbers came easily to him, puzzles even more so. But people were a language he learned slowly. The girl was Leona Thompson, dark-skinned, small for her years, with eyes that seemed too old for her face. She laughed less than other children, not because she lacked joy, but because she learned early that laughter drew attention, and attention, for her, often came with cruelty. Nathan and Leona shared a bunk room with peeling paint and narrow windows that let in more dust than sunlight. The first night they spoke, Leona was crying quietly into her pillow, careful not to wake the others. Nathan didn't ask why. He simply slid his thin blanket halfway across the gap between their beds. It was a small thing, almost invisible, but it was how everything began. At the orphanage, kindness was a rare currency. Children learned to guard it, to ration it, to trade it only when necessary. Yet somehow, between Nathan and Leona, kindness flowed freely. When other children mocked Leona's skin, whispering words they had learned from adults who should have known better, Nathan stood in front of her without raising his voice. He never fought unless pushed to it. But when he did, it was swift and decisive, as if he had calculated every outcome before throwing a single punch. Afterwards, he would sit beside her, bruised and silent, while Leona cleaned the blood from his knuckles with shaking hands. They were not friends in the ordinary sense. They did not promise forever. They did not speak of dreams. They simply stayed. When Nathan moved, Leona followed. When Leona was punished, Nathan waited outside the office door until it opened again. At night, when the world felt too large and they felt too small inside it, they lay awake and counted sounds together. The ticking radiator, the distant train, the breathing of children who had already learned how to sleep without hope. Adults noticed Nathan quickly. Teachers praised his intelligence. Social workers wrote notes in his file with words like potential and exceptional. Adults noticed Leona differently. If they noticed her at all, she was polite, quiet, helpful, easy to overlook. When couples came to visit the orphanage, searching for a child who looked like them, or like the future they imagined, their eyes slid past Leona as if she were part of the furniture. Nathan noticed everything. On the day a wealthy couple arrived, everything changed without warning. They wore coats that did not belong to the orphanage, spoke softly but confidently, and asked questions that felt heavy in the air. They asked to meet Nathan, just Nathan. He sat across from them at a small table, legs swinging because the chair was too high, answering questions about school, about books, about numbers that made his eyes light up despite himself. From across the room, Leona watched, her hands clenched in her sleeves. That night, Nathan told her he was being adopted. The word sounded strange in his mouth, like a language he had not yet learned. He did not smile. He did not celebrate. He simply stated it as fact, the way he did everything important. Leona stared at him for a long time, then nodded once, as if this were another thing they could not control. "You'll be back," Leona said quietly. Nathan looked at her then, really looked at her, as if memorizing the shape of her face. "I will," he said. It was not a promise spoken for comfort. It was a conclusion, reached with the same certainty he applied to numbers and logic. "I won't forget." They did not hug. They did not cry. The orphanage did not teach children how to say goodbye properly, only how to endure them. The morning Nathan left, the sky was pale and undecided, the kind of day that could not commit to sunshine or rain. The staff gathered around him, smiling too widely, congratulating him as if fortune were contagious. He packed his few belongings into a small bag, a book, a worn sweater, nothing that tied him too tightly to the place he was leaving behind. Leona stood at the edge of the courtyard, her hands curled into fists, watching the adults usher him toward the black car waiting beyond the gate. The car was expensive. Even Leona could tell. It shone in a way nothing at the orphanage ever had. Nathan stopped once, turned back, and looked at her. For a moment, the noise faded. No adults, no gate, no future pressing in from all sides. Just the two of them, separated by a few steps that suddenly felt like miles. "I'll come back," Nathan said again, quieter this time. Leona nodded. She trusted him. That was the cruelest part. The door closed. The engine started. The car pulled away with smooth inevitability. Leona did not run after it. She did not scream. She stood still, watching until the car disappeared from sight, until the dust settled and the world resumed its ordinary indifference. That was the moment Leona learned the difference between intention and reality. Life at the orphanage continued. It always did. New children arrived. Others left. Leona grew taller, quieter, more careful with her heart. She learned not to expect people to stay, even when they meant to. Sometimes, at night, she imagined Nathan returning, older, taller, wearing clothes that did not fit this place anymore. In those moments, hope crept in uninvited, dangerous and fragile. But days turned into months, months into years. Nathan did not come back. Leona told herself she understood. He had been given a chance, a real one, the kind children like them rarely received. Still, understanding did not make the ache disappear. It simply taught her how to live with it, somewhere else, far away. Nathan Grock learned how to belong to a family that was not born of loss. He learned table manners, private schools, expectations carved in stone. He learned that love could be conditional, that success was a duty, that gratitude came with invisible chains. At night, in a bed that was far too large. He sometimes dreamed of a girl named Leona standing behind a gate, watching him leave without tears. He never forgot her. But forgetting is not the only way to lose someone years later. When Nathan had everything the world could offer and Leona had learned to survive with almost nothing, neither of them would remember this day as a tragedy. There had been no screaming, no dramatic farewell, no broken promises spoken aloud, just a quiet departure, a silent belief, and a vow without a name, drifting between two children who had no way of knowing how expensive that promise would one day become. 15 years changed the city, but it changed them far more. The boy who once shared half a blanket in a crumbling orphanage now woke each morning in a penthouse overlooking glass and steel. His name was Nathan Grock, and it carried weight. His signature moved markets. He had inherited not only a fortune, but an empire built by parents who chose him, trained him, and shaped him with precision disguised as love. He wore tailored suits, spoke in measured sentences, and learned early that vulnerability was a liability best managed in private. To the world, Nathan Grock was composed, brilliant, untouchable. To himself, he was a man who slept lightly and rarely dreamed. Memory did not visit Nathan often, but when it did, it came without warning. A certain silence would settle in a room, a sound of train horn in the distance. The scrape of a chair on concrete would pull him backward for a split second. In those moments, he saw dark eyes watching him from behind a gate. He never spoke of it. Nostalgia had no place in boardrooms. His life ran on schedules and expectations, breakfast meetings, investor calls, charity galas where his presence mattered more than his words. Women appeared and disappeared around him. Beautiful, accomplished, impressed by his status, and careful not to ask for too much. None of them stayed long. They sensed, correctly, that something in Nathan remained unreachable, sealed off behind walls he did not know how to dismantle. Across the same city, Leona Thompson woke before sunrise in a narrow apartment where the walls held heat and noise equally well. She tied her hair back, slipped into worn sneakers, and checked her phone for delivery requests. Her world was movement stairs, traffic lights, elevators that smelled of too many lives intersecting briefly. She worked hard, not because she believed in some romantic notion of perseverance, but because survival demanded it. Each completed delivery was rent paid, food secured, tomorrow postponed another day. People rarely looked at Leona twice. When they did, it was often with impatience, sometimes with suspicion. A dark-skinned woman in a delivery uniform learned quickly how to make herself smaller without shrinking her dignity. She kept her head high, her voice calm, her anger carefully stored somewhere deep and unreachable. Life had taught her that reaction was a luxury. Leona did not think of the orphanage often. Thinking back hurt in ways that no longer served her. Still, there were moments, usually late at night, when the past slipped in through the cracks. She remembered a boy named Nathan who never spoke unnecessarily, who stood in front of her like a shield without knowing why. She wondered, sometimes, if Nathan had kept his promise. The thought never lingered long. Hope, she had learned, was dangerous when it arrived uninvited. They lived less than 10 miles apart. Fate, patient and unsentimental, waited. The afternoon it happened. The sky threatened rain without committing to it. Leona was rushing, late for a delivery that paid extra if completed within a tight window. Her phone buzzed with directions as traffic thickened, horns blaring in chaotic conversation. She stepped off the curb too quickly. Her vision split between the street and the screen. The impact was sudden, sharp, metallic. Leona's shoulder hit the hood of a black luxury car. The world seemed to pause for a breath before sound rushed back in brakes screeching, someone shouting. Her own heart pounding violently against her ribs. She stumbled back, pain flaring, instinctively raising her hands as if bracing for accusation. The driver's door opened. Nathan Grock stepped out slowly, taking in the scene with an expression trained to reveal nothing. The suit. The watch. The quiet authority in his posture, all of it marked him as someone accustomed to control. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, something flickered across his face, too fast to name. Leona straightened, despite the pain. "I'm sorry," she said, steady and immediate. Apologies came easily to people like her. They were often required whether deserved or not. "I wasn't watching." Nathan studied her in silence. There was no visible damage to the car. There was, however, something else, an unsettling sense of familiarity he could not place. Her voice did something strange to him. Not recognition, something deeper, quieter. "You're hurt," Nathan said finally. "I'm fine." It was a reflex. Leona had learned to assess her body quickly. Discard discomfort. Keep moving. I can pay for any damage. That earned her a second look. Not disbelief, surprise. Nathan shook his head once. "There's no damage." A pause. "You should be more careful." The words were mild, but they carried an edge Leona recognized immediately. Privilege disguised as concern. She met his gaze without flinching. So should drivers who don't expect people to exist around their cars. The corner of Nathan's mouth twitched before he could stop it. It was not a smile. Exactly. But it softened something in him. He had not been spoken to like that in years. Perhaps ever. A light rain began to fall. They stood there longer than necessary. Strangers bound briefly by circumstance. Neither Nathan nor Leona asked the other's name. Neither stepped closer. Yet something passed between them, an awareness that lingered after logic insisted it shouldn't. "I should go," Leona said, adjusting her bag. Time was money. Delays were penalties she could not afford. Nathan nodded, stepping back to give her space. "Take care." Leona turned away, walking quickly, forcing herself not to look back. Still, her chest felt tight, her thoughts oddly unsettled. She told herself it was adrenaline, nothing more. Nathan watched her disappear into the crowd before returning to his car. For a long moment, he remained still, hands resting on the door, rain dotting his suit. He could not explain the pull he felt, the inexplicable sense that something important had just brushed past him. Neither of them knew it yet. But that brief collision had cracked open a door neither fate nor time had managed to seal. Somewhere between memory and future, an invisible thread tightened quiet, patient, and impossible to ignore. The city did not slow down after their collision. Traffic resumed. Rain thickened. People hurried past, with lives that did not pause for near misses or unfamiliar heartbeats. Yet for both of them, something subtle had shifted. like a note struck too softly to be noticed by anyone else, but impossible to unheard once it existed. Nathan Grock tried to return to his routine. Meetings blurred together. Voices overlapped. Decisions were made with the same calm efficiency expected of him. Still, his attention drifted. He caught himself replaying the moment Leona Thompson's eyes met his, steady, unafraid, tired in a way no luxury could erase. He had met countless women across polished rooms and private dinners, but none of them had unsettled Nathan like a stranger in a delivery uniform who refused to look down. That evening, standing before the glass walls of his office, Nathan wondered why he hadn't asked her name. Across town, Leona finished her shift late, rain soaking through her jacket as she climbed the stairs to her apartment. Her shoulder ached where she had struck the car, but the discomfort was familiar, manageable. What unsettled her was not the pain, but the way her thoughts kept circling back to Nathan's face, controlled, distant, yet marked by something she couldn't define. Wealth. She had seen before. Power, too. But there had been hesitation in him, as if part of him had stepped forward before the rest could stop it. She told herself it was meaningless. People collided every day. They moved on. They did not move on. 2 days later, Leona received an address she recognized immediately, not because she had been there before, but because it was impossible not to know it. The headquarters of one of the largest corporations in the city. The payout was unusually high. She hesitated only a second before accepting. Work was work. Security eyed Leona carefully as she entered the building, scanning her badge, her bag, her face. She kept her expression neutral, accustomed to scrutiny that went beyond procedure. When she reached the executive floor, the carpet softened beneath her feet, swallowing the sound of her steps. A receptionist took the package and asked her to wait. Nathan stepped out of the elevator at that moment. Recognition hit them both at once, sharp and undeniable. Nathan's stride slowed. Leona's breath caught, just slightly. For a second, neither spoke. The space between them felt charged, intimate, despite the glass walls and polished surfaces. "You," Nathan said, the word escaping before intention could shape it. Leona lifted her chin. "You." The receptionist glanced between them, confused. Nathan dismissed her with a gesture that brooked no argument, then turned fully toward the woman who, against all logic, now stood in his world. "I didn't expect to see you again," Nathan said. "Neither did I." Leona handed him the delivery confirmation tablet. Their fingers brushed when he took it. The contact was brief, accidental, yet it sent an unwelcome awareness through both of them. "You work here often?" Nathan asked. "Only when someone orders something expensive and fragile." Leona replied, "People like you." Nathan studied her, unoffended. "People like me," Leona met his gaze calmly. "People who don't like waiting." A corner of Nathan's mouth lifted despite himself. Fair enough. There it was again, that faint crack in his composure. He didn't know why he allowed it, only that it felt necessary, as if some instinct older than logic urged him not to push her away. "Coffee?" Nathan asked suddenly, surprising them both, as an apology. "For the other day." Leona hesitated. Time was currency she guarded carefully, yet something in his tone was not entitlement, but uncertainty. Curiosity outweighed caution. "1 cup," she said. "Then I go." They sat in a quiet corner of the building cafe, a space designed for discretion. Nathan ordered without asking. Black for himself, sweetened for her. Leona noticed, startled. She had no idea how he knew. Nathan noticed her noticing and frowned slightly, as confused as she was. Conversation came slowly at first. Names were exchanged. Nothing more. Nathan spoke of work in broad strokes, careful not to reveal too much. Leona spoke of deliveries, of the city, of people who treated her like part of the scenery. Nathan listened with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, not because it was invasive, but because it was sincere. You don't look at me like I'm invisible, Leona said, before she could stop herself. Nathan didn't pretend to misunderstand. I don't see how anyone could. The words settled between them, heavier than either expected. From that day on, their paths crossed with unnatural frequency. Deliveries requested by Nathan, always justified, always reasonable. Brief conversations stretched longer. He began to wait for Leona's arrival, without admitting it, adjusting meetings, glancing at his watch more often than he ever had before. Leona found herself accepting assignments she normally would have avoided, drawn by a pull she did not trust, but could not deny. The world around them noticed. Colleagues raised eyebrows. Security whispered. In a city where class and color drew invisible borders. The connection between Nathan Grock and Leona Thompson stood out. A wealthy white executive and a dark-skinned delivery woman did not belong in the same narrative. People watched Leona more closely, judged her more harshly. Nathan noticed the shift immediately. The first time someone spoke dismissively to Leona in his presence. Nathan corrected them without raising his voice. The room fell silent. Leona stared at him, stunned. No one had ever done that for her before. You didn't have to, she said later. Yes. Nathan replied quietly. I did. Neither of them named what was growing between them. Naming things made them real, and reality had a habit of demanding prices neither of them was sure they could pay. Still, something tender took shape in stolen moments and unguarded glances. In the way Nathan softened when Leona laughed. In the way Leona allowed herself to lean, just slightly, into the safety he offered, without asking. They did not know yet that the past was already catching up with them, that love once denied, then delayed, rarely returned without consequences. For now. They only knew this, whatever had been broken 15 years ago, had found its way back, not as memory, but as longing, quiet and relentless, threading itself through two lives that had never truly let each other go. What began as coincidence slowly learned the shape of intention. Nathan Grock stopped pretending his encounters with Leona Thompson were accidental. Deliveries appeared on his calendar like quiet confessions items he did not need, ordered from places she serviced, timed with precision that surprised even himself. He told no one why he insisted on receiving them personally. He simply waited. Waiting, Nathan discovered, was a form of hope he had never practiced before. Leona noticed. Of course, she noticed everything. At first, she told herself it was professional courtesy, maybe curiosity. Wealthy men were often bored, often lonely in ways money could not fill. Still, there was something different about Nathan. He did not look at her as if she were a temporary distraction. He listened. He remembered things she said in passing her favorite street for night deliveries. The bakery that closed too early. The way the city felt less cruel just before dawn. Their conversations deepened without either of them acknowledging the shift. They spoke about childhood in fragments, carefully edited, Nathan never mentioned the orphanage. Leona never asked about his family. Some truths waited patiently for the right moment, and both of them sensed this was not yet it. The city, however, was less patient. Whispers followed Leona now, in elevators, in security rooms. She felt eyes linger longer than necessary, measuring her worth, searching for an explanation that reduced her to something easier to dismiss. She heard the word opportunist spoken softly behind her back, heard assumptions shaped by skin color and social standing rather than fact. She had spent her life navigating prejudice, but this was sharper, more dangerous. This was proximity to power. Nathan noticed the change in her posture before she spoke of it. The way her shoulders stiffened when she entered his building. The way her humor sharpened into defense. "You don't have to keep coming here," Nathan said one afternoon, the words heavy with restraint. "I can stop." Leona looked at him for a long moment. "That wouldn't change anything," she replied. "It would just confirm what they already think." That night, Nathan stood alone in his penthouse. The city spread beneath him like a map of opportunities he had never questioned until now. For the first time, he understood that his privilege was not neutral. It was a force, one that protected him while quietly harming others. The next day, he made a choice. Nathan invited Leona to dinner, not in secret, not tucked away in a place designed for discretion. He chose a restaurant known for its visibility, its polished clientele, its unspoken rules about who belonged. When Leona arrived, wearing a simple dress that held dignity without apology, conversation faltered around them. She felt it instantly, the weight of eyes, the silent calculations. "Are you sure about this?" Leona murmured. "Yes," Nathan said, standing to greet her. "I want them to see." The dinner was tense at first. Not between them, but around them. Nathan reached across the table without thinking, his fingers brushing Leona's. She did not pull away. It was a small act of defiance, but it sent a message louder than any statement he could have made. Afterward, they walked through the city streets, away from judgment, away from expectation, under streetlights that did not care who they were. Leona finally laughed freely. The sound surprised Nathan, warmed him in places he had forgotten existed. "You don't have to fight my battles," Leona said quietly. "I know," Nathan replied, "but I want to stand with you." The word "with" lingered between them. Their relationship took shape not through grand declarations, but through presence, through consistency. Nathan showed up when he said he would. Leona trusted him, slowly, testing the ground before placing her full weight down. When Nathan touched her, it was with care, as if aware that something fragile lived beneath her strength. When they finally crossed the line into something undeniable, it was neither impulsive nor dramatic. It happened in the quiet of Nathan's home, the city humming distantly below, the past pressing in from places neither could see. They did not speak of love. They did not need to. Their bodies recognized what their words hesitated to claim, yet beneath the tenderness, shadows gathered. Leona began to feel tired in ways sleep did not cure. Her chest tightened unexpectedly, breaths sometimes shallow, her heart racing without warning. She dismissed it at first, blamed long hours, stress. Nathan noticed anyway. He always did. "You should see a doctor," Nathan said gently. Leona smiled, deflecting. "I'm fine." She was not fine. The diagnosis came quietly, delivered in a small, sterile room that smelled of disinfectant and inevitability. A congenital heart condition, manageable but dangerous, risky under stress, riskier still with pregnancy. Leona sat alone afterward, the city moving outside as if nothing had changed, her hand resting unconsciously over her abdomen as realization dawned with terrifying clarity. Two truths collided inside her, each reshaping the other. New life, a fragile heart, love that had arrived too late to be simple. That evening, she watched Nathan move through his world with practiced ease, answering calls, shaping futures that did not yet include the truth she carried. She saw how much rested on his shoulders, how carefully his life had been constructed. She loved him. That she knew without doubt. And because she loved him, fear crept in. Some loves demanded sacrifice. She did not yet know what hers would cost, but she sensed, with chilling certainty, that the price would be higher than either of them was prepared to pay. The truth did not arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, in fragments that refused to align, until it was too late to pretend nothing was wrong. Leona Thompson confirmed the pregnancy alone. The clinic was small, the waiting room crowded with lives unfolding in quiet parallel. When the nurse spoke the words, her voice was gentle, practiced, unaware of the storm they unleashed. For a moment, joy rose instinctively brief, instinctual, almost defiant. Then reality followed, sharp and merciless. Leona's heart condition was not a footnote. It was the central risk. Carrying a child could strain her body beyond recovery. Giving birth could stop her heart. Leona left the clinic with paperwork folded carefully into her bag, as if order could impose itself on chaos. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the collision of fear and love happening inside her chest. She pressed a hand over her heart, counting beats, grounding herself in the rhythm that had betrayed her by being both miracle and threat. She did not tell Nathan Grock. Days passed, measured by careful breaths and controlled smiles. Leona learned how to hide exhaustion, how to excuse moments when dizziness forced her to sit, how to redirect conversations away from the future. Nathan noticed the changes immediately. He always did. He grew quieter, more attentive, watching her with concern that made guilt coil in her stomach. "What's wrong?" Nathan asked one evening, his voice low, intimate in a way that left no room for escape. Leona met his gaze and looked away. "Nothing," she said. The lie tasted bitter, but she swallowed it anyway. Nathan reached for her hand, feeling the faint tremor she could not suppress. "You don't have to protect me," he said softly. That was when Leona realized the danger. Not the illness, not the pregnancy. The danger was how easily she could imagine a future with him. How quickly she could picture Nathan standing beside her, choosing her, choosing the child, rearranging his world without hesitation. Love, she had learned early, was most dangerous when it offered hope. The doctor was clear. Continuing the pregnancy would require constant monitoring, minimal stress, and luck. Termination would be safer. Adoption could be considered after birth, if she survived. Each option carried its own weight of loss. None of them spared her heart. At night, Leona lay awake beside Nathan, listening to his breathing, memorizing the rise and fall of his chest. She thought of the boy who had once promised to return. She thought of the man he had become. She thought of a child Who might inherit Nathan's eyes? His quiet intensity, his capacity for devotion. The thought hurt in ways she could not explain. Nathan began to talk about the future without realizing it. Not plans. Exactly. Questions. Where she wanted to travel. What kind of home she liked. Whether she preferred quiet mornings or crowded holidays. Each question was a thread, weaving something fragile and real between them. Each answer felt like a betrayal of the truth Leona carried alone. The breaking point came not with drama, but with inevitability. Leona collapsed one afternoon, breath stolen, pain flaring through her chest like lightning. Nathan was there in seconds, fear stripping him of composure as he held her while waiting for help. In the hospital, surrounded by monitors and hushed urgency, Leona watched Nathan's face as doctors spoke carefully around him, offering reassurance that convinced neither of them. Afterward, when they were alone, Nathan sat at her bedside, his hand wrapped tightly around hers as if anchoring her to the world. "No more secrets," he said, voice unsteady. "Please." Leona closed her eyes. The truth surfaced partially. Selectively, she spoke of the heart condition, of risks, of uncertainty. She did not speak of the child growing quietly inside her. Not yet. Nathan's reaction was immediate, fierce. He wanted specialists, second opinions, solutions bought with resources she did not possess. "I can take care of this," Nathan said. "Of you?" Leona nodded, letting him believe it was that simple. Days later, she made her decision. Leona told Nathan she was leaving, that she needed space, that this, whatever it was, had been a mistake. His disbelief cut deeper than anger would have. He asked what he had done wrong. She shook her head, tears burning behind her eyes. "There is no future here," Leona said carefully. "Not for me." The final lie came last, delivered with a calm she did not feel. "I was pregnant," she said. Nathan's breath caught. "But I took care of it. It's over." The silence that followed was absolute. Nathan did not shout. He did not accuse. He simply looked at her. Something breaking behind his eyes, as understanding, false understanding settled in. He respected her choice. That was who he was. He always had been. "I wish you had told me," Nathan said quietly. "So do I," Leona replied, meaning something entirely different. She left that night, packing only what she could carry. Nathan did not follow. He stood alone in the doorway of his home, watching the woman he loved disappear into the city, believing she had chosen freedom over him. Leona walked until her legs ached, until tears finally came, until the weight of what she had done pressed down with crushing force. She placed a hand over her stomach, whispering an apology meant for a child who would never hear it. The lie had protected him. That was what she told herself. What Leona did not know yet was that lies born of love do not dissolve quietly. They wait, and when they surface, they demand payment with interest. Leona Thompson vanished from Nathan Grock's life with the efficiency of someone who had practiced disappearing long before she learned how to stay. Days passed, then weeks. The city returned to its familiar rhythm. But for Nathan, everything moved as if underwater. He went to work. He attended meetings. He signed documents that altered futures he no longer felt connected to. People spoke to him, congratulated him, depended on him. He answered when required and remained silent when he could. No one noticed the difference. power, Nathan learned. Allowed grief to hide in plain sight. He replayed her words endlessly. It's over. The phrase followed Nathan into empty rooms and sleepless nights. He told himself he respected Leona's decision. He told himself love did not entitle him to explanations. Still, something inside him resisted closure, unsettled by the absence of anger, by the way the loss felt unfinished. Nathan did not search for her, not because he didn't want to, but because he believed doing so would betray the last thing Leona had given him: distance. Across the city, Leona prepared for a different kind of battle. Her body weakened quickly. The pregnancy progressed with quiet insistence, demanding energy her heart struggled to provide. Each appointment came with numbers she learned to interpret on sight: heart rate, oxygen levels, risk percentages. Doctors spoke to her gently, but Leona heard the warning beneath their reassurance. Survival was no longer assumed. She moved into a smaller apartment closer to the hospital, one with stairs she climbed slowly and windows that let in too much light. She sold what she could, worked when her body allowed it, and rested when it did not. At night, Leona wrote letters she never intended to send, pages filled with truths she had buried to protect the man who would never read them. The day of the birth arrived without ceremony. Labor came early, violent and unyielding, the room filled with urgency, voices overlapping, machines beeping in rhythms that felt cruelly mechanical. Pain blurred into fear, fear into exhaustion. Leona focused on breathing, on the promise she had made to herself and the child inside her. I will stay. I will try. When her heart faltered, time fractured. The world narrowed to sharp commands and frantic motion. For a moment, just a moment, everything went dark. Leona woke to silence and the soft cry of a newborn. Her survival was called miraculous. Her recovery was not. Weeks passed in slow motion, each day a negotiation between strength and fragility. She held her child with hands that trembled, learning the weight of a life that depended entirely on her. Love arrived fully formed, fierce and unquestioning, filling spaces grief had hollowed out. Leona named the child alone. She did not reach out. Not to Nathan, not to anyone who might lead back to him. Protection, she believed, required isolation. The world was unkind to women like her. Dark-skinned, sick, alone. It would be worse to tether the child to a man whose life would always belong to another world. Nathan moved on, or so it appeared. His wealth multiplied. His influence expanded. He gave interviews where he spoke of responsibility, of building something that lasted. He avoided questions about his personal life with practiced ease. Some nights, Nathan drank too much and stared at the city until dawn, wondering what kind of man accepted loss so quietly. 10 years passed. The child grew strong, curious, observant in a way that unsettled strangers. She inherited Leona's resilience and something else, an intensity that mirrored a man she had never met. She asked questions early, about family, about fathers. Leona answered carefully, choosing honesty without detail. He loved us in his own way. Leona would say, it was not a lie. Leona's heart stabilized over time. Though it would never be whole, she learned to live within its limits, measuring effort, choosing battles. Love became quieter, less reckless, shaped by the knowledge that time was neither guaranteed nor infinite. Nathan lived in a world built on certainty until the day a file crossed his desk that should not have existed. It was part of a philanthropic initiative, Healthcare Access, historical medical records digitized for research. A name caught his eye: Leona Thompson. The sight of it sent a shock through Nathan so sharp he had to sit down. Dates followed, diagnoses. A pregnancy marked as high risk. A delivery 10 years earlier. Complications: near-fatal cardiac arrest. There was no record of termination. The room felt suddenly too small. Nathan read the file again and again. Each detail rearranged his past, exposed the lie he had accepted without question. Leona had not chosen freedom. She had chosen sacrifice. And somewhere in the city, a child existed who carried his blood, his absence, and the truth he had been denied. The realization did not arrive as anger. It came as grief, raw, overwhelming, and inescapable. The past had waited patiently. Now it demanded reckoning. The truth did not shout. It settled into Nathan Grock like a weight he could not set down. For days after discovering the medical file, Nathan did nothing visible. He attended meetings, answered emails, signed contracts. Inside, everything rearranged itself around one undeniable fact: Leona Thompson had not lied to escape him. She had lied to save him, and in doing so, she had nearly lost her life alone. Nathan ordered a private investigation and canceled it within the hour. Some things could not begin with power. He needed to do this himself, stripped of authority, of entitlement, of the man he had been when Leona walked away. Finding her took less time than he expected, and more courage than he felt prepared to summon. Leona lived in a modest neighborhood where no one looked twice at Nathan, where his name meant nothing and his face carried no weight. When he stood across the street from her building, watching a child skip down the steps ahead of her, his breath caught painfully in his chest. The girl was small, dark-skinned, bright-eyed. She laughed freely, the sound cutting through him with surgical precision. There was no doubt. Nathan recognized himself, not in her face, but in the way the child observed the world, alert, thoughtful, already bracing for disappointment. He did not cross the street. That first day, Nathan watched and left. So did the next. He learned Leona's routines, not out of entitlement, but reverence. He saw how carefully she conserved her energy, how she rested without apology, how she spoke to her child with honesty, softened by tenderness. He saw the quiet strength it took to build a life with no safety net, and realized how little he had understood about courage. When Nathan finally knocked on Leona's door, his hands shook. She opened it and froze. Time did something strange then, folding in on itself until 15 years, 10 years, and a single devastating lie collided in the narrow space between them. Leona's face drained of color, her hand instinctively moving to the doorframe for support. "You can't be here," Leona said. "I know," Nathan replied. His voice was low, controlled, barely holding together. "But I am." Leona tried to close the door. Nathan didn't stop her. He stood there, accepting the rejection without protest, until the sound of a small voice drifted from inside. "Mom." The door opened again. They did not speak of the past that day. Leona sat across from Nathan at a small table while the child colored on the floor nearby, glancing up occasionally with open curiosity. Nathan kept his distance, his posture deliberately non-threatening. He did not reach. He did not claim. "I know," Nathan said quietly. "About everything." Leona's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. "Then you know why you can't stay. I know why you did it." Nathan said, "I don't know how to live with the fact that you did it alone." That was when Leona broke. Not loudly, not completely, just enough for the truth to breathe between them. "You had a future," Leona said, "a life that would never forgive you for choosing me over it. I couldn't be the reason you gave it up." Nathan shook his head. "You never asked me what I wanted." Leona looked at the child, then back at him. "I did what I had to." Nathan nodded. "So did I. I just didn't know it yet." Their reconciliation was not immediate. Healing rarely was. Nathan did not move in. He did not demand access. He showed up when invited. He left when asked. He learned how to listen without interrupting, how to apologize without explanation. He sat on the floor and let the child decide when curiosity outweighed caution. The first time the child asked who he was, Nathan answered simply, "Someone who cares about your mom." That was enough. Whispers followed Nathan now instead of Leona. Questions from his world grew sharper, more judgmental. He did not hide. He did not explain. For the first time in his life, he let silence do the work. The day the child took Nathan's hand without being prompted, his breath caught painfully. He did not squeeze back, afraid to break something sacred. The child looked up at him and smiled, as if the decision had already been made internally and required no announcement. Later that night, Leona watched Nathan walk away again, just as he had years ago, but this time, with intention to return. She understood then that some wounds did not need to be erased to heal. They needed acknowledgement, patience, time, love. Leona realized, did not demand possession. It asked for presence. And for the first time since the orphanage gate closed behind him all those years ago, Nathan understood that redemption was not something he could earn with effort or wealth. It would come slowly, measured in trust rebuilt, and a child's laughter echoing into spaces that had once been hollow. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, they were walking it together. Time did not heal them. It tested them. Weeks passed into months, measured not by calendars, but by small negotiations of trust. Nathan Grock became a careful presence in Leona Thompson's life, arriving without expectation, leaving without resentment. Some days Leona allowed him to stay for tea, to help with homework, to sit quietly while the child spoke about school with animated seriousness. Other days she kept the door closed, exhaustion or fear winning the argument. Nathan accepted both with the same quiet resolve. The child watched Nathan closely. Children always knew when adults were pretending. She noticed the way he listened fully, how he knelt to her level when speaking, how he never interrupted her stories even when they wandered. She tested boundaries with innocent cruelty, asking questions that had no safe answers. Why did he come and go? Why didn't he live here? Why did her mother sometimes look tired after he left? Nathan answered honestly, but simply, because some things take time. The child seemed to accept that. Time, she had learned, was how adults explained most things they couldn't yet give. Outside that small apartment, the world grew louder. Nathan's absence from social circles sparked speculation. His quiet withdrawal from public appearances invited rumors he refused to correct. When his relationship with Leona, a dark-skinned woman, and a child became impossible to hide, the reactions were swift and revealing. Board members offered concern disguised as advice. Old friends questioned his judgment. Family members spoke of optics, legacy, responsibility, as if those words had not already been rewritten in his heart. Nathan listened. Then he chose differently. The first time Nathan publicly acknowledged them was not at a gala or in an interview, but at a hospital fundraiser where he stood beside Leona, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Cameras flashed, whispers rippled. Leona felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not physical this time, but emotional, born of years spent bracing against judgment. "You don't have to do this," Leona whispered. "I do," Nathan replied. "Not for them, for you." That night, alone, Leona cried for reasons she couldn't fully articulate. For the girl she had been, overlooked and underestimated. For the woman she had become, strong yet so tired. For the love that had found her again, asking not for sacrifice this time, but courage. Leona's health fluctuated, as it always did. Some mornings were generous. Others demanded stillness. Nathan learned the signs quickly, the way her breath changed, the subtle pause before she sat. He never made her feel fragile, never hovered. He adjusted, adapted, stayed present, without reminding her why. The child grew bolder. One afternoon, she asked Nathan to attend a school event. He hesitated only long enough to ask Leona's permission. The room was filled with parents who looked like each other, spoke like each other, belonged without question. Eyes followed them as they entered together, Nathan in tailored restraint, Leona in quiet dignity, the child between them, holding both their hands. Nothing was said aloud. Everything was understood. That night, as they walked home, the child skipped ahead, humming to herself. She turned back suddenly, eyes bright with something close to certainty. "You can come again," she said, as if granting permission. Nathan smiled, something unguarded breaking through. "I'd like that." Later, after the child slept, the truth they had been circling finally demanded space. Nathan and Leona sat together, the city quiet beyond the windows, the past heavy between them. "I was angry," Nathan said softly. "Not at you, at myself, for believing the lie because it was easier than questioning it." Leona nodded. "I didn't think you would forgive me." "I don't think forgiveness is the right word," Nathan replied. "I think I finally understand." Understanding did not erase pain, but it changed its shape. It allowed room for something new to grow, not the reckless love of youth, but a steadier devotion, shaped by loss and intention. The first time the child fell asleep against Nathan's shoulder, it startled him into stillness. He barely breathed, afraid to disrupt the fragile trust placed so casually in him. When she woke and found herself there, she did not pull away. She simply adjusted and returned to sleep. Something in Nathan settled. The word father hovered unspoken, too powerful to rush. Nathan did not claim it. He earned pieces of it quietly in lunches packed, in bedtime stories read badly, in patience practiced daily. One evening, as Nathan prepared to leave, the child tugged his sleeve. "You're coming back tomorrow, right?" Nathan glanced at Leona, who nodded once. Yes, he said. I am. The door closed behind him, not as an ending, but as punctuation. Leona watched him go, heart steady, knowing the road ahead was still uncertain. Love had not solved everything. Prejudice had not disappeared. Her health would always require care. The past would never fully release them. But something essential had shifted. For the first time, the future did not feel like a threat. It felt like a choice. And this time, Nathan Grock and Leona Thompson were choosing it together. The world did not forgive quietly. Once Nathan Grock and Leona Thompson's story crossed the threshold from rumor to fact, resistance hardened into something sharper. It arrived in polite language and concerned expressions, in meetings that suddenly included conversations about stability and long-term perception. Nathan listened as board members spoke of shareholders, as advisors framed their objections in the language of caution rather than prejudice. No one mentioned race directly. They did not need to. The implication hovered unmistakably in the air. Nathan declined to retreat. What surprised him most was not their opposition, but how little it shook him. Power had taught Nathan how to bend systems. Love had taught him where to stand firm. The pressure, however, found its way to Leona. Strangers began to recognize her. Some smiled with forced admiration, others with poorly disguised suspicion. Online commentary reduced Leona's life to speculation, her intentions dissected by people who had never learned her name. She had lived under judgment before, but this was different. This was exposure without consent. One evening, after reading a particularly cruel headline, Leona closed her laptop and sat in the dark, breathing carefully until her heart slowed. Nathan found her there minutes later, alarm sharp in his eyes. "We can stop," Nathan said immediately. "I can pull back. I can make this quieter." Leona looked at him, truly looked at him, and shook her head. "No, I won't disappear again." The choice was not dramatic. It was resolute. They moved forward deliberately. Nathan restructured his commitments, stepping away from roles that demanded performance over presence. He surprised everyone, including himself, by refusing a promotion that would have consumed what little space they had carved out for real life. Headlines framed it as a mystery. Nathan framed it as alignment. Leona's health demanded attention in ways neither of them could ignore. A complication sent her back to the hospital one cold morning, the familiar smell stirring old fear. This time, she was not alone. Nathan sat beside her bed, holding her hand without apology, reading to her until the tension in her chest eased. "You should rest," Leona murmured. "You don't have to stay." "I know," Nathan replied. "I'm staying anyway." The child sensed the fragility beneath the calm. She became quieter, more observant, her questions sharper. One night, she asked the question they had both been avoiding. "Is he my dad?" The room fell silent. Nathan did not answer immediately. He looked at Leona, who closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "Permission. Trust." "Yes," Nathan said finally. "If you want me to be." The child considered this with seriousness that felt far older than her years. "Okay," she said. Then, after a pause, "You're bad at reading bedtime stories." Nathan laughed, startled, the sound breaking something open in him. "I can learn." The word still went unspoken. but the space around it softened. Opposition peaked when Nathan's family intervened. A private meeting, heavy with disappointment and veiled ultimatums. They spoke of legacy, of expectations, of how easily everything he had built could fracture. Nathan listened, then responded with a clarity that surprised even him. "I was chosen once," Nathan said. "I won't be the man who chooses abandonment again." The line was drawn. Nathan proposed not with grandeur, but with intention. No ring flashed beneath chandeliers. No audience watched. He knelt in their small living room while the child pretended not to stare too obviously. "We don't need permission," Nathan said. "We don't need approval. We just need honesty and time. I want to spend both with you." Leona did not answer immediately. She had learned the cost of hope, the danger of believing too fully. Then she reached for Nathan's hands, grounding herself in the warmth she had denied herself for too long. "Yes," Leona said quietly. The engagement did not erase uncertainty. Leona's health would always require vigilance. Nathan's world would never stop watching. But something essential had been reclaimed, not the innocence they lost, but the choice to build despite it. As preparations began, modest and intentional, the child hovered close, absorbing the shift in their world. One afternoon, without ceremony, she tugged at Nathan's sleeve and spoke the word for the first time. "Dad." Nathan froze. It was not loud. It was not practiced. It was simply true. Nathan knelt in front of her, eyes shining, and answered with the only honesty he had left. "I'm here." In that moment, the years of distance collapsed. The orphanage gate, the lie, the long silence, all of it gave way to something quieter, stronger, and finally whole. The ending was close now. Not perfect, but earned. The wedding did not make headlines. There were no crowds gathered outside. No cameras waiting for a spectacle. The world that had once scrutinized Nathan Grock and Leona Thompson's every step moved on to louder stories, bigger scandals. What remained was a quiet morning, soft light spilling through tall windows of a small garden chapel on the edge of the city. It was the kind of place people chose not to impress, but to remember. Leona arrived without fear. Her dress was simple, chosen for comfort as much as beauty, tailored to a body that had learned its limits and honored them. Her heart beat steadily, monitored carefully, respected without being defined by its fragility. When she walked toward Nathan, there was no echo of the girl left behind at an orphanage gate, no shadow of the woman who once carried everything alone. There was only presence. Nathan waited without impatience. Gone was the man shaped entirely by expectation, replaced by someone quieter, more deliberate. He had chosen this moment without compromise, without apology. As Leona reached him, Nathan did not speak. He simply took her hands, grounding himself in what was real. The ceremony was brief. Vows were spoken softly, meant only for the people who had earned the right to hear them. Nathan and Leona did not promise perfection. They promised effort. They promised honesty when fear returned, patience when old wounds resurfaced, and loyalty that did not retreat at the first sign of discomfort. When it was over, nothing dramatic happened. They smiled. They breathed. Life continued. Their child stood between them at the small reception that followed, her dress wrinkled from running, her hair slightly undone. She had insisted on choosing the cake flavor herself and guarded it with solemn authority. Guests few and carefully chosen laughed gently, mindful not to overwhelm the space with noise or expectation. Later, when the afternoon thinned into evening, Nathan, Leona, and the child returned home together. Not a mansion, not a symbol, a house filled with light and deliberate simplicity. It was there, in the quiet after celebration, that the moment arrived without ceremony. Nathan was helping the child with her shoes when she looked up at him, expression thoughtful. The word came easily now, no longer testing the space between them. Dad. It was the first time she said it without hesitation. Nathan stilled, then smiled, not the careful smile he offered the world, but the one he reserved for moments that could not be rehearsed. Yes, she grinned, satisfied, and returned to her task. That was all. No tears, no speeches, just truth finding its place. Leona watched from the doorway, her heart full in a way that felt almost dangerous. Not because it might be taken away, but because she finally allowed herself to believe it could stay. Life did not transform overnight. Leona's health required continued care. Some days demanded rest. Others granted energy she learned to spend wisely. Nathan adjusted without complaint, without framing love as sacrifice. It was simply how life worked, now shared. Negotiated, chosen daily. The world softened at its edges. Opposition faded into background noise. Some relationships were lost, others deepened. Nathan no longer measured success by expansion or control, but by the steadiness of mornings and the laughter that filled their kitchen. One evening, years later, they returned to the city outskirts where everything had begun. The orphanage was gone, replaced by a modest community center. The gate no longer stood. The ground where two children once learned the sound of abandonment felt strangely neutral now, stripped of its power. Nathan and Leona stood together, the child between them, listening as wind moved through trees, planted long after they had left. I used to think leaving meant losing everything, Nathan said quietly, and I thought staying meant being forgotten. Leona replied. The child squeezed their hands. You're both here, she said, stating what mattered most. They walked away without looking back. Love had not erased their past. It had reframed it, turning loss into foundation rather than fate. What Nathan Grock and Leona Thompson built was not loud. It was not perfect, but it was real, anchored in choice, sustained by presence, and finally free from the weight of unnamed promises. Somewhere between the orphanage and the altar, they had learned the truth neither of them had known as children. Home was never a place you returned to. It was something you chose, together, and kept choosing every day after.